Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's mini training, Point Clouds from Reality to BIM. My name is John Atkinson. I'm an applications engineer here at CTC. And this is being recorded and will be uploaded with links emailed out a little bit later today. So with that, let's get started. So point clouds, this mini training is an overview of how we can use Recap 360 with laser scans and cover the overall project workflow. We'll talk about some new features and how to bring those point clouds into Revit for modeling in a little bit. So why Recap? Recap's got some pretty good features as far as how we can bring in laser scanning information. It also allows us to do photogrammetry and turn those into point clouds as well. Today we're just talking about laser scans, but we can use Recap to view those point clouds, edit the point clouds. We can automatically register those point clouds together from multiple scans, or if for whatever reason it fails, we can go in and manually register those scans to identify common points. We can also add survey points. There's also an intelligent cleanup function. We can do markups and we can measure between points. So what's new and what's coming soon? Importing CAD geometry into Recap. And we also have scan to mesh. That's a function we already have. And combining a drone scan or photogrammetry from a drone along with a laser scan. So what is our workflow? We'll start off with a scan project. Just click on scan. We can import all of our files or a few or as many as we have. Then we'll go in and edit those scan settings to basically check the resolution or define the resolution that we're looking for. Then finally we register those scans, which means combining them all together. And if the auto registration doesn't work, then we would go in and manually register those. Once the scans are all put together, then we hit index, and that basically turns it into Recap scans and a Recap project. And then we click Launch Project. From there, we go into our Revit and import the point clouds. So scanning the project or scan projects, we can we'll name the project and then import the raw scans or RCS files. Then one tip, we always want to work from our local, not from a network server. The reason being it's much faster, and also we have seen issues with files being on a server where it may lock up. So to avoid any issues, we always want to put our laser scan files on our local and process from there. And then we begin the import. So a quick demonstration on how that works. Simple as scan project. Click that button in the top. Oh, sorry guys, I may have not had my screen on air. So I'm going to quick jump back to the beginning. Sorry. So here's our point clouds from reality to BIM, title page, mini training overview, our features slide, what's new, our workflow that we just went over, and our import scans, and from there we're jumping into recap. So from here I can hit scan project, name our project, and hit proceed. From here I would drag in my files. So here's my recap project, here are my scans, and I could go down, select all 45 scans, and drag and drop those onto my project. I'm not going to do that because it does take some time. So I'm going to go back and start here where I've already had 3 scans already brought in. Now they do take probably 2 to 3 minutes a piece, so 45 of them would probably eat up all the time we have today. But let's say we've got 3. I'm going to bypass this next button and just go straight to my settings. And on the settings, if we take a look here, we have filtering. So this is going to go through and filter out any noise. It'll filter out extraneous points that, extraneous points that recap deems are not fit, or they're not part of the geometry that we're looking for. So you can do minimal, which preserves all of the points, standard, which will keep most of the points, and then aggressive, that just shows the points that, like I said, it deems part of the geometry. We can also set our clipping range to be how far away from the scan point are we going to include points. And then in intensity clipping, we can adjust that based upon the number of points on a certain object. Under advanced, we have decimation. So it will go through and clean out any points that are closer than, say, 5 millimeters, or the which is pretty good resolution. Or we can set that to whatever you feel necessary. The fewer points that we have, the smaller the point cloud and model is going to be when we're done. And then also under the coordinate system, we can apply a coordinate if you're doing, say, a scan of an exterior scan of a building and a site. So here we are in our settings. I find that standard filter seems to work out pretty well. It also gets rid of any aberrations during the import. And I typically leave my range clipping alone and set my intensity clip to 100. Up here on the right, we have an advanced tab, and this is where we would set our decimation. Default is 5 millimeters, or just over a quarter of an inch, or just under a quarter of an inch. This is where we would set our coordinate system, and what are we using? This does take some time, but we can select that coordinate system for the county that we might be working in. and we can identify the target. So if we set out a target with known coordinates, we would define all that here. Next, if we come back here, we can just come right to either register the scans, and it walks us through it. Doesn't take very long. As you see, we're already done. And here's my scan. Auto registration complete. I have 3 scans that have been processed, 1 group created, and here are my targets that it's using to identify how these 3 scans get put together. We can also, if we have additional targets that it doesn't immediately recognize, we can give it spherical targets or checkered targets. We can also click on a little mirror balls over here in our plan view, which we can zoom into, and scan around and take a look at the other side. So each of our individual scans, and once we're done with that, we just hit index those scans, and it goes through and will process those. And it does take a little bit of time, but really it's that fast and easy bringing your projects in. See, I'm going to go back to my PowerPoint. So we have our automatic registration, and that selects, it looks for those common points that it can correspond between scans. The scans will automatically place themselves in the model, and if the correspondence can't be found, then we'll have to do a manual registration. So we're at 58% complete. This is not nearly as time consuming as bringing the scans in the first place, loading those files. So we can select to register manually if we have, if we had scans that said it did not recognize some of the common points. And one of the key features of getting it to register automatically is placing your targets in such a manner that they're not always on the same plane. As you can see here in our view, I have a target stuck to the door frame. Then there was one earlier in our project that was actually within, I'll just click on project since it's done processing. I'll go back to this view. So we have one on the door frame, one in the hallway, another one at a slightly different height on this door frame down the hall. And if I move down the hall, I have one here, one on that door frame. There's that other one that's on the door frame. And one in the hallway, and that one back on that door frame. So what Recap is doing is going through and finding common points, looking for these spheres, and recognizing that that's a target that it can automatically use to register the scans. So when a match for those targets is found, it will automatically register. Now if you go through manual registration, then you can define those targets here by clicking that, saying that's a target. what's the name of that target, and then finding that same target in your other scan to say that's the same point. And then this one, that's the same point. And that's how you would go through and manually register. So we already went through indexing the scans. We're taking all that information and converting it into basically a recap file. This takes a couple of minutes, but if you have a large project, it could take hours. And this is when the RCP is created. So now we have a scan or a project. Now what do? We want to clean up those straight points, create a mesh, and align any point clouds to a grid or create regions and possibly do some measurements. So here are 3 points, or 3 scans that we imported. Come here. And we can go through, click on the little cloud icon, click on cleanup, and hit cleanup. And that's going to go through and find anything that doesn't quite fit. If you saw one of the scans, there was a person in the corridor when we ran the scan, but they're not in all of the scans. So that would get cleaned up. So once it's completed, then it creates its own little scan region that we can then turn off or delete. This does take just a few seconds depending on your file size. Okay, and that is done. Now if we look down here on the bottom right, this is where we'll find our regions. There's our cleaned points region that it just created, and as I hover over it, you'll notice up in the corridor there are a series of points that it's going to clean out. We can turn those points off, or we can delete that entire region and say, get rid of that. Do we want to delete the region itself, leaving the points, or get rid of the points and the regions and just delete those out completely? You can also come in here and, get back. Say maybe I want these points to be added to a region and deleted. Once I just window and select, I can create a new region or add them to a region that's already there. In this particular one, I'll say new. I'm actually going to clean this up just a little bit. Let's do all of these points. Oops. I'm going to set my view uncheck perspective so I can have some orthogonal control over it. And I'm going to take out everything down to the ceiling. So I'm going to add a new region and level 1, say OK, and that automatically assigns a color to it, and if I want, I can turn that off. I can go back to a 3D view. We could continue cleaning this up or getting rid of points until we're all done. We could also set limits to say my project is only so big. only show me the points within that limit. And we're not done yet. Just forgot to add the bits about bringing it into Revit. So this is already a project. If I do a save as, it's already here. We called it this earlier. But I want to bring this, my entire scan project that took several hours to process, into Revit. So I go Insert tab, Point Clouds, and I want this 8101 basement, auto center to center. Yeah, that should be okay. And here it is. If I go to a 3D view, you can see I have the entire basement, including the stairwell. If I hover over it, you'll notice there's several different colors. That's denoting the several different scans that were placed during our project as we were creating it in Recap. If we take a look in here, I could say red, green, blue, elevation, intensity, or scan location. If you take a look here, it's different colors. I'm actually going to bring up the basement itself, this full scan, launch that project, and here's that entire scan. Along with all the different colors applied for each scan. Now some of these scans, some of these spaces were done in 2, 3, sometimes 4 different scans. So you'll see overlapping colors. And then that's what we see when we come into Revit. If I go back to my level 1 floor plan, I don't have everything in here. It doesn't appear that way. Which means if I go to this elevation view, that my scan is just a little bit below my floor level. Simple enough to come in and move that up. And I could keep nudging it upwards so that my level 1 is right at the floor level. Now I seem to have a lot of data, so I would go through and maybe edit my view range a little bit, maybe pull it up off the floor a couple inches, get rid of the floor information, say OK, and now I have wall, maybe some furniture in here. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to try and get this aligned so I can actually draw some nice straight walls out of this data. I'm just going to pick a point and just draw straight up. Now when I select it, select my scans, I can do a rotate. Come here. Grab that center point, bring it down. Let's get a little closer here. Get to this end point down here. Click some points along the wall and come up. Give that a second to process. And from here I can start now drawing walls. 5-inch generic. finish face, exterior, and start drawing. I can also use those points for measurements. So if I wanted to know the distance between that wall and this wall, "38 feet, 11.5 inches, give or take." And that's really all there is to it. We can go into our front elevation. We can do some clipping with scope boxes. We could right click, orient to view, floor plans level 1, and that's going to try and clean things up for us as well, so that it's only showing us the wall information, the ping pong table, some additional furniture, some of our equipment, and whatnot. Now you can also, if we go into our mechanical room, which I believe is right here, going to duplicate this view, crop it, bring this in so that we can start looking at just our mechanical equipment. Let's orient that 3D view to that copy 1. And from here, I can start planning out, here are my air handling units. Here's some duct work coming along the top. Let's go along the other side. We only scanned this from one or two directions, so we didn't get in this back corner. But here we've got pumps, compressors that we can start adding some piping to. If we go back to our floor plan, come in here, there's some piping, ductwork, pipe, and we can pick from these points, use our space bar and pick another point. And of course I'm in an architectural plan. And turn my pipe on. Let's try that again. See if that shows up. Yep. We could change that to fine. Edit our pipe size. Maybe bring that down to 2 inches. Let's see. If I can pick that. Then we can move our piping into place. Cut a section, see how well we did in placing it. and maybe clean some things up. So our piping should be up here. Fine, and maybe go to wireframe. There's that first pipe we did. Maybe bring that up to the top. So it takes a little bit of work, but at least we would have all of our plumbing information in place. If we come over and take a look at this particular riser. So we have some of it up here, some of it here. So coordination is, it's not the easiest thing in the world, but at least you have all of your scan data to be able to bring that information together. So here's some piping along the bottom. We can turn off select links so I don't select everything every time I hover over it. Control tab back to our plan. Maybe I go to the other section. And there's that pipe across the bottom here. So that's how we get from recap into our project and navigate around a little bit. If we want to go to our project, here are our mirror balls. We could change our view within a recap to an intensity to show us that how intense the point cloud is. And that's it. Thank you for watching and enjoy your afternoon.